The modern world begins with a paradox. We imagine today's economy as a web of billions of free choices, a marketplace of competition, innovation, and opportunity. But trace the lines of power far enough back, and you find something different. A system built deliberately, piece by piece, by a man who believed competition was not a virtue, but an obstacle. His name was John D. Rockefeller. And whether you're filling your gas tank, paying for medicine, searching the internet, or even donating to charity, you are moving through the architecture he designed more than a century ago.
Picture America in the late 1800s, noisy, chaotic, booming. Railroads stitched the country together. Oil wells erupted from the earth like industrial geysers. Entrepreneurs poured into new industries, chasing fortunes overnight. But in that chaos, a young bookkeeper from Cleveland saw something else. Inefficiency, waste, disorder, a system with no conductor. While others cheered the frenzy, Rockefeller studied it like a mathematician. He saw that the future didn't belong to those who drilled the most oil, but to the person who could organize the entire system around it. That insight created Standard Oil, and Standard Oil created the corporate world you live in.
John Davison Rockefeller was born in 1839 into contradictions. His father was a traveling salesman with a reputation for dishonesty. His mother was devout, disciplined, and believed hardship built character. Rockefeller absorbed both influences, the relentless frugality and the cold, calculating logic. At 16, he began as a bookkeeper. His gift was not selling or drilling or chemistry. It was structure, understanding how money moved, where value leaked, and how a system could be redesigned to eliminate waste. So when oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859, Rockefeller didn't rush to the oil fields like everyone else. He stayed in Cleveland and studied the economics instead. He realized something essential. Drilling was gambling. Refining was business. Refining oil into kerosene, the dominant lighting fuel of the 19th century, was predictable, scalable, and ripe for organization. So Rockefeller built the most efficient refinery in the region, not by being the biggest, but by being the most disciplined. This would become the core of his method. Control the process, reduce the uncertainty, expand only when the numbers make sense. It was the opposite of the Wild West, and it worked.
Vertical integration, owning the supply chain. Most refiners bought barrels from one company, chemicals from another, transportation from railroads, and storage from warehouses. Every step leaked profit. Rockefeller plugged every leak. He bought barrel factories. He built his own warehouses. He negotiated exclusive shipping contracts. He even constructed pipelines when railroads resisted him. By controlling every step, crude oil, transportation, refining, distribution, retail, Standard Oil reduced costs to levels competitors simply could not match. Efficiency became a competitive weapon. Horizontal integration, absorbing the competition. By 1872, Rockefeller launched a wave of acquisitions later known as the Cleveland Massacre. Refinery after refinery sold to him, willingly or not. He never raised his voice, never made threats. The numbers did the talking. Standard Oil's cost advantage meant competitors could join him or slowly collapse. Within weeks, he controlled nearly every refinery in Cleveland at fair prices, but under terms he dictated. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled roughly 90% of U.S. oil refining, not through brute force, but through efficiency, scale, and legal contracts crafted with surgical precision. The Trust Revolution. There was a problem. As Standard Oil expanded into multiple states, Regulations tried to block out-of-state ownership. So Rockefeller's lawyers developed a new structure, the trust. It was an elegant piece of financial engineering. Instead of one company owning others, Rockefeller and his top associates held shares in trust that controlled dozens of subsidiaries. This structure would evolve into the modern holding company, the backbone of America, of corporate America. What Rockefeller needed was a legal way to concentrate power. The trust gave him exactly that.
Rockefeller's blueprint had 4 pillars, each one reshaping American business. 1. Vertical integration. Control every part of the supply chain to reduce costs and eliminate vulnerability. 2. Horizontal consolidation. Acquire competitors, standardize processes, and avoid destructive price wars. 3. Regulatory alignment. Instead of resisting regulation, Rockefeller sought to shape it, promoting standards that large, well-capitalized companies like his could meet, but smaller ones could not. 4. Philanthropic institutional power. Later in life, Rockefeller pioneered a new model of philanthropic foundations. These weren't simply charities. They were professionally managed institutions that influenced medicine, education, and public health. The Rockefeller Foundation funded medical research that helped standardize medical education in the U.S. It supported public health campaigns, eradicated disease, and helped build universities. This philanthropy earned public goodwill, but it also shaped systems in ways that favored large-scale, professionalized institutions. Efficiency, hierarchy, centralization, the same values that built Standard Oil. The blueprint was spreading beyond oil.
In 1911, after decades of public pressure and government scrutiny, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil to be broken into 34 separate companies. It was the most famous antitrust ruling in history. But here is the twist. Rockefeller owned stock in every one of those 34 companies. And as they competed and expanded independently, the combined value rose dramatically. His wealth multiplied. The breakup did not end the system. It ensured its survival in new forms. Many of those companies remain giant corporations today. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, Conoco, and others. The system had shed its skin, not its power.
Rockefeller's methods became the unwritten laws of modern business. The holding company structure appears in firms like Alphabet, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, and J.P. Morgan Chase. Vertical integration powers giants like Amazon, which controls logistics, warehousing, cloud infrastructure, and retail channels, echoing the system that once tied together oil wells, pipelines, refineries, and rails. Philanthropic foundations, from the Gates Foundation to large university endowments, follow a model Rockefeller helped to pioneer. Independent, professionally managed, long-term institutions with global influence. Even the idea of regulatory alignment, shaping rules rather than fighting them, is now a standard practice across industries, from finance to pharmaceuticals to technology. Rockefeller didn't just build a company. He built a template, and that template became the operating system of the global economy.
The story of Rockefeller isn't simply about oil. It's about design. He looked at a chaotic world and imagined it organized. He believed efficiency was morality. He treated competition as waste, not virtue. And the systems he built, in business, in law, in philanthropy, became the structures that still define how companies expand, how markets consolidate, how regulations evolve, and how global institutions operate. You interact with that system every day. When you fill your car, when you shop online, when you search for information, when you visit a hospital, when you donate to charity. The architecture is still visible, if you know where to look. History often remembers Rockefeller as a monopolist, but perhaps his real legacy is something more subtle and far more enduring. He redesigned the machinery of capitalism itself, and we're all still living inside the world he built.
The post-Rockefeller era, when the architect fades, but the architecture remains. Years before his death, Rockefeller had already stepped away from the front lines of business. But something unexpected happened. His power didn't disappear. It transformed. He was no longer a businessman. He had become a blueprint. When Standard Oil was broken apart, the world thought the age of industrial emperors was over. But the dissolved companies acted like living fragments. Each one grew on its own, guided by the same internal logic their founder had hardwired into them. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Conoco, Amoco, they were pieces of a shattered empire that regenerated into giants. Rockefeller was gone, but his system was very much alive.
The era of war and aviation fuel. When World War II erupted, oil turned into the lifeblood of victory. The companies born from Standard Oil powered the global conflict, fueling tanks, aircraft, warships, and supply chains. Energy was no longer just a commodity. It became strategy. Nations realized something Rockefeller had understood decades earlier. The backbone of modern power is energy, and the backbone of energy is the Rockefeller method. The era of automobiles and suburbia. After the war, the explosive rise of personal automobiles created a global need for fuel on a scale never seen before. Only the Rockefeller lineage companies had the infrastructure to meet it. They weren't businesses anymore. They had become the circulatory system of civilization.
Before his death, Rockefeller understood something even deeper. The future is shaped by knowledge. If you want to influence a century, you don't build a company. You build institutions. The Rockefeller institutions, the Rockefeller Foundation, University of Chicago, Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, programs that standardized medical education, funding for economics, social sciences, and public health. These institutions produced research. Research shaped policy. Policy shaped society. His model of permanent philanthropic institutions became the template for modern foundations, Ford, Carnegie, Gates, and countless others. Quiet power, soft power, enduring power.
The world may no longer revolve around oil, but the Rockefeller operating system still runs beneath our digital age. Amazon, like Rockefeller, it vertically integrates every layer of logistics. It controls distribution end to end. It uses scale and efficiency as competitive weapons. Apple, a closed, perfectly engineered ecosystem. Hardware to software to services to retail. A digital mirror of Standard Oil's supply chain control. Google and Meta. Rockefeller refined oil. These companies refine data, the defining resource of the 21st century. Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett perfected the holding company structure Rockefeller pioneered. Dozens of companies, decentralized operations, centralized discipline. Rockefeller once said, "A good system is more important than a good man." Today, the systems he built keep expanding, with or without him.
Rockefeller spent 60 years designing structures that outlived him, structures that still shape everything from energy to technology to philanthropy. When he died in 1937, his name faded from headlines,
But his logic remained, a logic that said civilization cannot run on chaos. It needs structure. It needs scale. It needs systems. And those systems proved so effective that today, from oil giants to tech giants, from banks to global NGOs, the world still copies the same blueprint. Rockefeller may have been one man, but ultimately, he became the architect of the industrial and digital worlds we inhabit today.
By the mid-20th century, something profound had happened. The Rockefeller model was no longer just a corporate strategy. It had become a geopolitical strategy. When governments realized that energy, finance, medicine, and information needed centralized coordination, they unknowingly stepped into a world Rockefeller had designed decades earlier. A world where large, disciplined institutions replace chaotic competition. Energy as strategy? Oil companies born from Standard Oil did not merely supply fuel, they shaped global alliances. Pipelines influenced borders. Oil concessions influenced coups. Shipping routes influenced military bases. What Rockefeller created for efficiency, nations used for power. Finance as leverage? As the U.S. grew into a financial superpower, its banks, investment firms, and insurance companies quietly adopted the same strategies. Vertical integration, holding structures, regulatory influence, and long-term institutional planning. These were the same tools Standard Oil had pioneered. The result was a financial architecture that operated like an empire, one that stretched across continents without firing a shot. Rockefeller believed that permanent institutions, not individuals, should shape the future. And today, the institutions that influence the world carry his DNA. The rise of global organizations. Bodies like the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Health Organization were built in a century shaped by Rockefeller-funded policies, Rockefeller-trained scholars, and Rockefeller-modeled institutional design. Not because Rockefeller controlled them, but because his method became the model for how power organizes itself. These institutions operate on the same principles he refined: large-scale coordination, long-term planning, centralized decision-making, and data-driven governance. This wasn't conspiracy. It was evolution. The world adopting the most efficient organizational template it had ever seen.
Yet the story isn't one-sided. New giants have risen. Tech giants, platform giants, cloud giants. And if you look closely, their DNA still resembles Rockefeller's ideas. Cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, they are the pipelines of the digital age. They own the infrastructure everyone depends on. They are vertically integrated, massively scaled, ruthlessly efficient. Device ecosystems, Apple, Samsung. Closed environments, controlled distribution, centralized decision-making. Search and social and advertising, Google, Meta, they refine raw data the way Standard Oil refined crude. Logistics titans, Amazon and Alibaba, they have rebuilt global supply chains the way Rockefeller rebuilt distribution networks. The actors changed. The architecture did not. These companies are not escaping the Rockefeller model. They are perfecting it. Power, the silent force that shapes civilization. Power rarely announces itself. It hides behind bureaucracy, behind institutions, behind infrastructure, behind technology. The greatest power is not the one that commands armies or owns resources or writes laws. The greatest power is the one that sets the rules everyone else must follow. Rockefeller understood this better than anyone of his century. He built a world where competitors played on his field, regulators responded to his moves, Governments depended on his systems. Markets evolved according to his architecture. This is the purest form of power, to shape conditions so deeply that people forget you created them. In the 21st century, the same pattern repeats. Cloud platforms control how information moves. Financial networks define how value flows. Algorithms decide what people see, learn, or believe. Infrastructure giants influence national destinies. Power did not disappear. It changed its clothes. The machines we live inside. Most people think they live in countries. In reality, they live inside systems. Systems that tell them where energy comes from, how communication works, how money travels, what knowledge spreads, how decisions are made. These systems operate above politics, below culture, inside technology. We do not vote for them. We do not see them. We rarely question them. But they shape everything. Rockefeller's true genius was recognizing that whoever builds the system builds the world. Today's builders are AI architects, platform engineers, energy futurists, biotech pioneers, masters of data and computation. They are the new system architects, the descendants of Rockefeller's philosophy, whether they realize it or not.